The first reading is by the poet Mary Noonan. Mary's first collection, The Fado House, won the Listowel Poetry Collection Prize. And in this video, Mary is reading from her recent collection, Stone Girl, published by Daedalus Press.
Hello, my name is Mary Noonan and I'm going to read a couple of poems for you. I write poetry and publish it for my sins, and ta-da! My second collection was published by Daedalus Press in 2019. The book is entitled Stone Girl, and I'll read two poems now from that book. The first poem I'll read was inspired by a tree. A dead tree, in fact, that I spotted once in County Monaghan one summer. So, the poem is entitled Calvary. Calvary. 3 trees stand on the brim of the lake, on a slight incline, for all the world like crosses on the hill of Golgotha. The good thief and the bad thief are in verdant health, but the horse chestnut standing between them is dead. Its bald form cuts a shocking figure in midsummer Monaghan, where all is emerald, lime, apple green, bosky, ferny, mossy. The crucified tree stands at maybe 30 feet, dwarfing the other two, so that I want to say a father with a child on either side. What happened to the old man to stop the juices from flowing through his venous tissue, stop his respiratory system from converting light to sugar? Must he stay planted there, forever dead, in full view of his children, while the blind universe whirls its Catherine wheels round him? Today, for example, nifty white waves are barreling over the surface of the lake. But the upright corpse does not respond to the wind's tickling, its ashen branches poking dead fingers at an ice cream sky. Will no one take it down? Would its old bones not feed a stove, even if they no longer move to the wind's creaky tune, no longer bounce conkers off passing caterpillars? And we'll move now from County Monaghan to the island of Majorca. And the second poem I'll read was inspired by a visit to the house of the poet Robert Graves, which is on the island of Majorca. It's in a beautiful setting on a hillside overlooking the sea. But the most interesting thing about the house is that the way it has been preserved, it feels as if the poet has simply stepped out for a moment and everything seems to be exactly as, it might have been when he lived there. So it inspired my poem. The house that will never be. It may take a few years to build the house you refuse to believe in, the house that will never be. I see us humping stone and timber with the help of the locals. We will build on rock carved in terraces rising from the sea, beneath a canopy of carob and orange. The walls will be powder blue, the floors yellow sand. A stack of wood will be piled beside the kitchen stove, and by way of a sink, a capacious enamel bowl. In the hallway, a bronze brazier will burn olive stones and husks from the garden, warming us on our return from village or shore. And a wooden rail with pegs will hold our battered straw hats and baskets. I know you spit on the twin studies, one each for you and me, with walnut tables and straight-backed chairs and small casement windows framing the distant hills. When the winds blow down through the valley, we will light our pinewood fires and sit and listen to the crackle. You will write all night, and I will write by day, and sometimes your rhythm will be that of my footsteps pacing over your head. Our hens will run giddily among the fallen fruit, and at night our lamp will be seen for miles, a shepherd's fire at the far end of a dark field. And oh, the dreaming that will go on in that warm, quiet house high above the world, the house that will never be. Thank you very much for listening to me reading my poetry. Thank you.
Ailbhe Ní Ghearbhaig is an Irish language poet. Her most recent book is The Coast Road, which is a dual-language collection published by Gallery Press. On this video, she reads both the Irish and the English versions of one of her recent poems.
Hello, my name is Ailbhe Ní Ghearbhaig, and I would like to read a poem in support of Cork Arts Theatre, the Cat Club, a place where I have spent many wonderful evenings. This is a poem called Shalavoo, and it's about pigeons on the north side of the city in Cork. And then I'll read the translation, Possession, by Billy Ramsell. Shalavoo. Bhí na colúir ann Rome, Shelaveco lec na foinóige, is rá téir an tí. Chú siad Easter maidin mé lena nuair dáil, a good sú lá ruachan lá stail den gurtín, chahan iad a ruige. A da bhím gur thug cleatar gurisk is scíháin, sásamh doracha dom. Maidin na bhain, ní colamáin a bhí Rome ach fiular a chrága an gofra taricán. Béig an isce criscathe, budéalda a chahabh na róch an a dhíbert. Mús glín, tá brat cletí sa chlós, há coracú I gcónaí I machluas. Possession. There they were, the pigeons, in possession of the windowsill, of all the house's gutters. Their cooing brings me to every morning, their rust-red eyes beyond the curtain. They've got to go. Though I admit the snapping chatter of their wings brings a black satisfaction. One morning was pigeonless, but instead an eagle's talons gripped the dresser. It took holy water, an entire bottle cast in its direction to banish it. I'm awake. The yard boasts a cloak of feathers. There's cooing always in my ears. Sin a bhfuil, gur míle maith agaibh.
Jerry Murphy is a member of Éastána and author of numerous collections of poetry. Here he is, reading a selection of short pieces. His most recent collection of poetry, The Humours of Nothingness, is published by Daedalus Press.
My name is Jerry Murphy and I'm going to read you some poems. My first one is called Poem in One Breath. Not that you would notice, but every time you pass up the corridor, Lenin's statue levitates slightly to get a better view of the remarkable ease with which you fill curved space. And we'll continue with Note to an Autocrat. Have I mentioned Sulla, supreme campaigner, ruthless butcher? Even you would be impressed, vigorous reformer. In 79 BC, he resigned his dictatorship, dismissed his lictors and walked home a private citizen. Absolute imperial power, absolutely dismantling himself and taking a quiet stroll into history. You, on the other hand, could drive to the airport and fly to a comfortable exile in Washington before I even begin to finish this. And here's lunch at the yacht club. Tucking into my lasagna and chips, Studying an illustrated article in Time magazine concerning the recent slaughter of Bengalis in Assam, which contains a photograph of 34 children being laid in neat rows to fit without difficulty into a ready-made mass grave, I am reminded by the waiter that I have yet to order dessert. I cover the photograph and ask for cheesecake. With cream? Certainly with cream. Headgear of the tribe. With apologies to Desmond O'Grady. Brits on the pavement, ice in the wind, my mother is knitting my first balaclava. And there goes the train. That's to give you the authentic background. A note on the demise of communism. I give the communist salute to my capitalist ex-girlfriend as she takes the corner at a clip in her black BMW, doles me out an imperious nod and leaves me to choke back Marxist-Leninist rhetoric in a plume of carbon monoxide. And flicking through, among thieves. There are pickpockets in the cathedral, warned the bishop. They may get to your purses before we do, muttered the worried priest. There is a God. There is a God who beams at the damask altar cloths, who basks in the golden glow of the chalices, who dozes to the lullaby of hosannas. When grieving mothers come to the church for solace and let their pennies rattle into the big iron box, he wakes up disgruntled and fires down a dose of clap at the priest. Ta-da. The big issues. Word comes true that you are working your ass off. If there is one as lovely in the teeming seraglio of a Turkish soccer player, I'll eat my face. If there are breasts more shapely within the vests of Mao's fearless militia women, I'll swallow my little red book. And you're going to have to switch books, lads. Talk among yourselves. This is my current collection, which is called The Humours of Nothingness, which you can get on Amazon. Right. For the Paris Archives. Spring 1943. She sits outside a small sunlit cafe just off the Champs-Élysées, elegant, fragrant, radiant. Coco Chanel waiting patiently for her Nazi officer lunch date. And there we go. Let's see, looking there we are. My life as a Stalinist. Capitalist lackey, I shouted my father across the dinner table during a discussion on the feasibility of the second 5-year plan, the return of Fianna Fáil to government, or my dismal school report, probably all three. The conversation stutters to a halt, and for a moment there is silence. My father's response is laughter, knowing full well that I'm only half aware of the meaning of my misdirected insult. You're a great one for the slogans, Jerry boy. Try to read a little more of the literature underpinning them. In fact, go back to your beloved Stalin and study his voluminous essays on this very subject and his method of dealing with backsliders, saboteurs and lackeys. And get back to me and call me whatever you like. And here's one called Between Ourselves. In August 1940, Stalin sent Mercader to Mexico City to open tentative negotiations with Trotsky, to break the ice, so to speak. And I shall finish with this one, called Miss Molotov. Because she had walked through a fuel spill without noticing, she arrived at the Peace and Reconciliation meeting smelling like a petrol bomb. Thank you for listening.
Despite being a self-confessed Arsenal supporter, Graham Allen is an academic and an award-winning poet. His collections The Madhouse System and The One That Got Away, as well as his ongoing e-poem called Holes, are all published by New Binary Press. His poem Earth Angel was performed by Gatecrash in 2020. A new collection, No Rainbows Here, is due to be published by Salmon Press shortly.
A question. Imagine there was no place for you, nowhere to rest on this fertile earth. Tell me, my friend, what would you do? Dig a hole in the dust and disappear? Grind your teeth and wail at the moon? Curse God and teach your children to throw stones? March together in hopeless defiance, fists raised high against tanks and tear gas? Or would you stay still and silent and die, crammed into the one small box they allow you? The men with dark glasses and heavy machine guns whose faces stayed blank when they murdered your boy. Imagine there was no place for you, nowhere to rest on this fertile earth. Tell me, my friend, what would you do? Mythologies. How will we know when the end has arrived? Who will board up all the windows? What kind of person will be left to mentor the solitary child in the village school? How will we know, those of us who care, when the last heron has abandoned us? What colour will the sky and the hills become when the distant sound of engines cease? When the last stretched limo takes the last remaining banker with the last of the money out through the gates, how will we buy food or clothes or alcohol or answer the door to our desperate neighbours? When we are left to our own devices, the power supply is shut down at source, and all our screens are still and not voiceless, what stories will we tell our sons and our daughters? Valediction. There is no consolation because there is no sadness. There is no sadness because it could not have been avoided. Regret is not relevant nor akin. Tragedy is nowhere in sight. There are wild eyes full of incomprehension and tears, but this is very far from saying there was ever choice. There was never any choice. There was a day full of rain, there was the summer of glorious sunlight. This is weather, it arrives. Nothing more. It arrives, it comes, it goes. There's no consolation because it simply arrived, like the weather, like mist rises. A snake swallowing the bowl of the valley, the green, brown, yellow hills that are not the valley but make it, like death. Like death makes life and all its interstices, the spaces of what we call the world. Why do they hate us so much? A small television screen in a cafe, a group of Palestinian boys jumping up and down as if they had won the World Cup. As the second plane ignites within the swollen belly of the second tower. They don't hate you. You're not even an element in their elevated thought. They're just not used to the experience of winning, have never before known an answer to their prayers.
John Fitzgerald's poetry came to prominence when he won the Patrick Kavanagh Prize in Listowel in 2014. He has a new collection, The Time Being, which is due to be published by Gallery Press later this year.
Hello, my name is John Fitzgerald. I'm a poet, and it's my pleasure and indeed honour to read for the Cork Arts Theatre. The first poem I'd like to read, of a number of poems actually, which appreciates the time of year that we're in at present, which is early spring, is called Etude. Etude. All day the hiss, the press, the yes of sycamores in first fresh leaf, as if welcoming themselves, as if melting the wind passing through them. And, now that I listen, the ongoing arachnid whine of harvesters laying down swathes somewhere around Kilbarry, a first cut dry for the blade at last. Just there, the score of a car along Beamish's line. And, like heartbeat or breath, always in the inner ear, the songbirds chiming and half rhyming their memes and old motifs, and oblique herewiths, and what-nots, and what's more besides. This poem also features birds, and it's also set in spring. It's called Spring Thrushes. Spring Thrushes. Where they winter, we can't be sure. There is the science, but that's no answer. And how do they know just when to come onto the lawn from the kitchen wood? So perfectly pointed and preened, sprung just right for flicking away leaves and drilling under, locking stock still every half minute, beak strings wriggling. Another hop, skip forward, a pause. Their day has come and they're having all of it. This is a poem called Seeing Clear, and it's based on the experience that I've had of coming back to live in the place that we are here now, that I am here now, that you're here now with me in. It's called Carrickdarrary, and it is the old family home, and it describes a realisation, I suppose, of the cycle restarting of me rearing my children here in the place where I grew up. Seeing Clear. This sunny spring morning, the full throttle of a passing tractor will draw one of them running out to stare down at the gap between the piers, wait for the flash revelation, whose tractor it is and what they're up to on a Sunday. And, sure enough, I see him standing on the mown lawn in his favourite white-hooped jumper, hand raised to shade his eyes, brown curls catching at the tips a glint of auburn from the sunlight. He turns and waves to me, and I wonder if my real purpose in returning here has been to make good the past, ensure that someone gets it right this time, so that, even if only for an instant, this much can be clear. This is a poem called Heritage. Again, it's based on the place that I am here, which is my home in County Cork. Heritage. The slate that lay on the lawn all winter sank slowly under clover, silverweed, plantain, the wet grass fringing it unevenly. I hoped no one would step there to relish the dull, flat snap and its collapse into 2 or 3 splints, no longer clean slate, but resigned for reuse on the path, far from the snug slot it once slid to, fixed to the rafters of the loft, now gone, like the men who built and kept it stocked, the oats they spilled from the hefted sacks, the invisible grain-rustling rats, the mill that winnowed my life into this existence. Here's a poem about another bird, this time the tree creeper. The tree creeper is, as it says, a bird that climbs trees and finds food in them. Tree creeper. Now is time for prying, prizing, when cold finally eases and bare limbs grow limber in the viable air that incubates titbits for the fits and starts of grey-brown. By chance we see scale and swivel the sycamores intrepidly. Out of sight now, on the far side, as if to hide an unlikely white chest, as if knowing that we too will flit to the next distraction.
Cathy D'Arcy is an award-winning poet who describes herself as a feminist academic and an activist. For a full list of her publications and achievements, she invites you to visit her website, cathydarcy.com.
Hi, this is Kathy Darcy. I have 2 poems I'm going to recite for you. The first is called Girls, Scarecrows and Dragons, and I guess that's what it's about. Mary was born twice, once, and her sisters Mary soon after and before. The bumps of their heads uneven the ground, enrich the mulch of leaves so that something grows in the shape of a man always standing across the road. When visitors come, an orange drops from his hard old hand, dimple belly to the ground like an invitation. The maw in the centre of the dining room is uncrossable, whorls of old carpet. The orange could be handed round to take the heat of our pink hands, germinate. Mary is both so angry that her bodies rotate at the rate of once a year. She must surely act. As it grows older, it changes shape, smells stronger, begins to kick, dimple cocoon. Who is the one who has broken this one and let this one alone? The little juice slits, sustained from a lifetime of cutting, drive many mad, but are unnecessary. Now he sees us, though we close our eyes for the kind of fire on the inside. He dropped it to see if it flies. Dark whirl holes over the edge of the sink. The juice is the reward. Inside, the juicy reward. The trick is to play hide and seek until it is tricked out of hiding and caught. Will you come out, creature, and show us your brazen wingspan? It broke when he dropped it, whirled, and something showed in the crack. The second poem is called Riverlea. Again, it's about that. I guess in particular it's about the Save Cork City campaign. What I am water, black and still, far away at the dam, just waiting until I am many, am one. I am always new. I am you and not you. You are talking to me about me. I am filling the shapes of the ones who made me. I am filling the places you let me. You are looking at me. You are talking about me to me. But I have words still to say. That I start at the weir, where I run over fields, into underground car parks, locked boxes, closed rooms. That I start where I split into 2 under separate bridges and sometimes over and through. That I start to sing as I run through the grass, through the branches of trees, through the doors of the houses, the hospitals, that you are walking in me. That I start where you come to an end, at the tallest obsessions of you, the parts I will run into too in time. You can't build away from me. That you are still sinking in me. That I start where I leave you behind, at the point of the port I am free, the part where I spread out my arms and embrace the sea. That I start where you end. That you have long since stopped listening to me. Thank you very much.
Patrick Cotter is the artistic director of the hugely successful Munster Literature Centre. He has numerous collections of poetry to his name, as well as editorial and other publications. His most recent collection is Sonic White Poise, published by Daedalus Press.
My name is Patrick Cotter. For this reading for the Cork Arts Theatre, I'm going to read 2 poems of mine set in Cork. First one recounts an experience I had when I was 16 years of age, which is over 40 years ago now. It's called 16. December 16th, 1979, I came across the headstone of Sarah Paddington, who departed this life aged 16 on December 16th, 1821. A grey slab laid flat, its incisions legible only on a rainy day, since the inclemency of decades had worn rough its limestone surface. Once polished and crisp, but now blotched with segments of exposed crinoids, old by as many years as there are raindrops in a province-wide storm. The day's rain had eased. The gargoyle gutter spouts gargled to a glugging halt. I was strolling in the grounds of St. Finbarr's Cathedral, 16 years old myself, and speculated no one had thought of Sarah Paddington in a century. Not even the workmen who had moved her headstone, too busy to read it when the rebuilt cathedral spread out 60 years after she went in the ground. Beneath my boots, lichen slithered a million times slower than snails. I reckoned the soul of Sarah Paddington had summoned me to her headstone on her anniversary. Skeptics will snigger over magical thinking, but I could only believe Miss Paddington wanted someone to think of her, to imagine her in a Fitton Street parlour with blonde ringlets, regaled in a flouncing party dress, blue eyes coached to be coquettish at men older than me, before whatever pestilence wasted her so young entered her and thinned her to a breathless stick. Later I lit a candle for her purgatorial Protestant heart at Catholic St. Augustine's. The view. A man hauled a window all day long, slung over his shoulder like a big wooden cross. It was a sash window with 9 panes. So many people thought he was a repairman without a truck, or some recycling freak on his way home from a dumpster. But really, he was homeless, and liked to stare at the world through a window he could call his own. He shook off the occasional offer of help. Nobody else was going to get their hands on his window. At certain street corners he would sit on the pavement and take in the view between the little square frames. On the corner of South Mall he would admire his favourite elm tree, the one with the bend to it caused by the wind, and on Sullivan's Quay a big white and black mongrel who could be seen at the same time each day, strolling away from Toomey's shop with fat wagging tail and a packet of potatoes clenched between slobbering lips. On Pope's Quay he placed the window on the curved-topped stone wall to watch the swans floating by, heads rising and lowering on their curling necks. On McCurtain Street he watched the girls of St. Angela's in their jade uniforms, the same his dead daughter once wore. One day he stumbled, fell on his knees, then gashed his temple off the curbside to save the glass. One of the schoolgirls wiped the blood from his forehead with her handkerchief, while her classmates stood in a circle, swiping at the horrid scene through their phone screen.
Amongst many other distinctions, Theo Dorgan is a widely published poet, editor of the Great Book of Ireland, former director of Poetry Ireland and a member of Eas Dána. His most recent publications include Orpheus, published by Daedalus Press, and Bailléad Gifógacha, published by Cushcane.
Three poems about Cork, 2 long ones and a short one. I'm not sure what that's the Morse code for. Closed circuit. The light of evening falls in swathes over the north side of the Blackpool. Children are rolling downhill in the long grasses of Bell's Field, over and over, elbows tucked tight, drenched in the smell of earth. They never seem to hit rocks or roll in the signature of the city, broken glass. Laughter and light trip memory inward, rooftops press forward some long-forgotten summer, and I fall in delicious vertigo into a classroom where I sit silent, staring. Even that youngest swallow, climbing on leaf smoke, starting on the miraculous journey south, bends downwind for home, though he has never been there. I sat in the smell of wood and chalk dust, baked in the sun with smell of the slaughterhouse, my mind soaring through the roof, neck hairs bristling. I hung for hours over familiar lanes and streets, picturing another home in another country. The calls of my classmates after school were high, wide and shrill, familiar and alien. The memory neither fades nor fails to haunt. Afternoon music over North African streets. And today, I think you are a village in those mountains. There are squares and fountains, wells of cool darkness in the centre of each house, the walls soaked in a whiteness that makes the heart ache. Every house is a house of mystery. Even the scrubbed tables are blessed with the imprint of your daily use and habit. Open the drab green shutters and lean out. I have been flying to you since childhood, and I thirst for the shock of your fountains, the cool shade of your care. Let me roll like a child forever in your hair. A Nocturne for Blackpool, for Mechanican. Dolphins are coursing in the blue air outside of the window, and the sparkling stars are oxygen bubbling to the moon. At the end of the terrace, unicorns scuff asphalt, one with her neck stretched on the cool roof of a car. A key rasps in the latch, milk bottles click on a sill, a truck heading for Mallow roars, changing gear on a hill. The electric hum of the brewery wines then drops in pitch, ground bass for the Nocturne of Blackpool. The ghost of Inspector Swansea creeps down Hardick Street. McCurtain turns down the counterpane of a bed he'll never sleep in. Unquiet murmurs scold from the blue slate rooftops, the death squad no one had thought to guard against. The young sunburned hurlers flex in their beds, dreaming of glory, great deeds on the playing fields, half days from school, while their slightly older sisters dream of men and pain, an equation to be puzzled out again and again. Wallou Delay, homeward bound on the Commons Road, belts out airs from Trovatore, the recipe as before, nobody stirs from sleep, and puzzled a judge, contented, pokes at ashes. For as many a man could learn today from what that man said. North Chapel, the Assumption, Farnferris and Blackpool, the mass of the church in stone rears like rock from the sea, but the interlaced lanes flick with submarine life, older than priests can or want to understand. This woman believed Jack Lynch stood next to God, who broke the Republic. This man beyond, his face turned to the wall, stares at his friend whose face will not cease from burning in the icy sea, torpedoed off Murmansk from a tanker. He shot him. Now nightly he watches him sink. Here is a woman the wrong side of 40, sightless in her kitchen as she struggles to make sense of the redundancy notice of her boorish son just home 4 years on the dole, foul-mouthed, for a husband who is aged 10 years in as many days. The bells of Shandon jolt like electricity through lovers in a cold water flat beneath the attic of a house in Hatton's Alley. The ghost of Frank O'Connor smiles on Fever Hospital steps as Mon boys go by arguing about first pints of stout and Che Guevara. The unicorns of legend are the donkeys of childhood. Nobody knows that better than we know it ourselves. But we know also that dolphins are coursing through the blue air outside our windows, and the sparking stars are oxygen bubbling to the moon. We are who we are and what we do. We study indifference in a hard school and in a hard time, but we keep the skill to make legend of the ordinary. We keep an eye on the slow clock of history in Blackpool. Jesus himself, as we say around here, was born in a stable. And a short poem for Jerry Murphy, a neighbour of ours. The lift of a linnet's wing was all he asked, with the fog a light gold over the brewery and the bells tumbling over sweet Blackpool from the North Chapel, Shandon, the Assumption. To be standing on Richmond Hill and the pale sun shining, a day in October, the air clear in his head. Nothing out of the ordinary. A simple, perfect moment. The lift of a linnet's wing was all he asked for and got.
Thomas McCarthy is a poet, novelist and critic. He won the Kavanagh Prize way back in 1977 and has been publishing ever since. He tells me that his only backstage contribution to the theatre arts was when he was a student in UCC and he worked as an assistant stage manager on a production of Yerma. And he managed to acquire 4 props.
Here are 4 poems written during lockdown for my friend Ger Fitzgibbon and for all lockdown theatre friends. Parallel, in memory of Christo. Echoes, more than anything else, can create a way in, like when your man wrapped the Reichstag in folds and draperies and made it seem momentarily a tender thing. The way sunlight fell on it made a sound of your heart beating. Similarly, when we walked under his saffron gates in Central Park, we were young again, and it was the same when I heard the glottal words uttered by that Irishman's oily purples and greens, all of his parallel lines like so much sheet music, music that deprivation makes with a heavy lid upon it for so long. Again, I ask you what art is, as I did when I held your fingers outstretched. Your engagement ring, I remember, against my finger created an echo, an ekphrastic. And this poem, at Desmond O'Grady's cottage. Kinsale on a brilliant morning in early September. The sky has fluttered down in its wetsuit of blue and sits beside me on this wall at Ardbrack. A crew of gulls assemble, expecting me to remember the part they played in the voyage so far. I divide the purse of a half-eaten sandwich and scatter it between the ropes and spars of late summer growth, and each hungering seafarer goes in for the kill. A riot of complaints, like the riot of words out of Desmond's barely contrite mouth. Excuses for no cake in the house and milk gone sour against the fragile wall. Desmondo, the whole world has gone to hell since you left us, and I remember you still in this chaos of lockdown, of pandemic, of seagulls. Things on my desk. This now slightly rancid coffee cup from months ago has stood on a blue plastic box of faded 35mm slides since that early April evening. I brought it here, coffee still steaming, and the cup itself vibrant with accrued conversations from the city below. I forget which group it was that gathered in the coffee shop beneath the wearily heavy railway bridge. But as the names fade, and that golden feeling of being in good company also dehydrates for want of practice, I take a look at these slides from the blue box and think how time, that old projectionist, sends back the light to me that my sense of isolation had dimmed so fatally. Images of people whose names I've now forgotten come between me and the low energy bulb swinging from the ceiling. I've disturbed something on my desk that didn't need to be disturbed. From among the paper clips, fountain pen ink cartridges, blank diary and unused bus tickets. A coffee scent that has surfaced like ink through a need to disturb this melancholia, the year's settled idleness. And finally, this poem, Moon and Virus. This one moon has gone nowhere for months, but has circled the house in a bitterness of phrases. See the lean light of its no company, the watermark of the idle moon and sterile invitations, the loss of income in its nothings. Our bleached weeks and these rotting peonies in a downpour, a thin light that cuts the end papers so that I can read the full book of its pale blue isolation. It was all a sign. In the poems of the future, we shall work remotely, remote from each other, as this moon with its blue signals and striations of grey. Vulnerable as a moon, all our weeks have toppled over. This moonlit room reads my life in a way it never could before, and there is no escape, not from its thinning light.